Harper Wells sat in that Manhattan courtroom, 7 months pregnant, watching her husband laugh as she broke down in tears. Blake had stolen everything: her money, her home, her reputation. The judge was about to hand him custody of their unborn child. Then the door slammed open. Her billionaire ex walked in with evidence that would destroy Blake's perfect lie. But here's the twist that was just the beginning. Because Blake had one more card to play, a card so devastating, it would make Harper lose everything all over again. What happens next? You won't believe how this ends. If you love stories about justice and revenge, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to hear every second of this. Now, let's go back to where it all started. The courtroom smelled like old wood and broken promises. Harper Wells pressed both hands against her swollen belly, 7 months pregnant and drowning in her own tears. Across the polished mahogany table, her husband Blake Thornton leaned back in his custom-tailored suit, actually laughing. Not a nervous laugh, not embarrassment, pure amusement. His attorney, Garrett Pierce, whispered something behind his hand, and Blake's grin widened. The sound cut through the Manhattan courtroom like glass scraping concrete. Harper tried to look away, focusing on the judge's gavel, the American flag hanging limp in the corner. Anything but that smile that used to promise her forever. "Mrs. Thornton," Judge Sharon Reeves said, her voice flat with exhaustion. "Do you understand the custody proposal being presented?" Harper's throat closed. She nodded, unable to force words past the knot of panic. Garrett stood, smoothing his tie with practiced ease. "Your Honor, my client is prepared to assume full custody upon the child's birth. Mrs. Thornton's documented mental instability and recent termination from employment raised serious concerns about her ability to provide appropriate care." The words landed like punches. Mental instability, termination, unfit mother, all lies. Carefully constructed lies that sounded like truth. Harper's court-appointed attorney, Paige Morris, shuffled papers nervously, overworked and underpaid. Paige had already told Harper in the hallway that this wasn't looking good, that Blake's evidence was damning, that sometimes the system just failed people. "The medical records speak for themselves," Garrett continued, placing a thick folder on the evidence table. "Dr. Melissa Crawford, Mrs. Thornton's obstetrician, has documented severe emotional volatility, paranoid episodes, and what she terms as dangerous behavioral patterns." Harper clenched her fists. Dr. Crawford played golf with Blake every Sunday. The woman had barely spent 5 minutes with Harper at each appointment, but somehow had pages of detailed psychiatric observations. "Don't cry," Harper whispered to herself. "Don't give him the satisfaction." But when she glanced at Blake again, he was still smirking, leaning back like a man watching his favorite show. The tears came anyway, hot and humiliating, tracking mascara down her pale cheeks. Judge Reeves sighed, rubbing her temple. "Mr. Pierce, you may proceed with closing remarks." Blake stood then, buttoning his jacket with the arrogance of someone who had never lost anything. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth as poisoned honey, "my only concern is the well-being of my unborn child. Mrs. Thornton has suffered a complete mental breakdown over the past several months, and while I sympathize, I cannot in good conscience allow my child to be raised in such an unstable environment. I'm asking this court to protect an innocent life from—" The heavy courtroom doors slammed open. The sound cracked through the silence like thunder. Every head turned. A tall man in a charcoal gray suit stepped inside, sunlight exploding behind him through the doorway. 3 attorneys in matching navy suits followed, carrying briefcases that looked expensive enough to pay Harper's rent for a year. "Your Honor," the man said, his voice carrying authority that made even Judge Reeves straighten in her chair. "I apologize for the interruption, but this case directly involves an ongoing fraud investigation connected to my company." Harper's breath caught. She knew that voice. 8 years hadn't changed the way it wrapped around words like a promise. Cole Bennett, her ex, the man she'd left because she thought building his tech empire mattered more to him than building a life with her. Now he stood in the courthouse looking like power itself. Clean lines and quiet confidence. A Mont Blanc pen gleaming in his breast pocket. Blake's composure flickered. His jaw tightened as murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Everyone knew the name. Cole Bennett, the cybersecurity billionaire. the man Forbes called the architect of digital defense. What company? Garrett stammered. Recovering. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Cole's expression didn't change. Bennett Security Systems. We've been conducting a corporate fraud investigation that uncovered financial crimes directly connected to this custody case. Judge Reeves blinked, clearly caught off guard. Mr. Bennett, you are making serious accusations. What evidence do you have? Cole handed a folder to the court clerk. Financial records showing that Mr. Thornton used shell companies to hide campaign funds, and that his wife's name and identity were used without her knowledge or consent to open fraudulent accounts. Gasps filled the courtroom. Camera flashes from the press bench lit up like lightning. Blake shot to his feet. This is absurd. Your Honor, this man is my wife's ex-boyfriend. This is clearly harassment designed to interfere with legitimate custody proceedings. Harper pressed her hand over her mouth, shaking. The baby kicked hard against her ribs, as if sensing the storm breaking around them. Cole's eyes found hers for the first time. Something in his gaze softened, just for a moment. Then he turned back to the judge, and his voice became ice. Check the documents, Your Honor. Everything's there. Account numbers, signatures, dates. Mr. Thornton has been committing fraud for 18 months. And if his wife hadn't been named on these accounts, she'd be facing criminal charges right now instead of fighting for her child. Judge Reeves opened the folder, her expression darkening as she scanned the pages. Blake's color drained. For the first time in months, he wasn't smiling. And Harper realized, with a jolt that felt like waking from a nightmare, that maybe she hadn't lost yet after all. But she had no idea that the real battle was just beginning. Harper woke up to an empty bed. Again, the sheets on Blake's side were cold, which meant he'd left hours ago. She checked her phone, 3:47 in the morning. No missed calls, no texts. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the baby shift. Good morning, little one, she whispered. Just us again. The apartment was too quiet. Their place in Brooklyn had always felt more like Blake's bachelor pad than a home. Modern furniture in blacks and grays, abstract art that looked expensive but meant nothing, a wet bar that got more use than their kitchen. Harper made decaf coffee and tried not to think about the fact that her husband had stopped coming to bed. When her phone finally buzzed at 6:30, she grabbed it hopefully. Not Blake, a new freelance client confirming their project. At least work was going well. She spent the morning designing a logo for a small business in Queens, losing herself in color palettes and typography. This was what she was good at. This was where she had control. At 2 in the afternoon, Blake's gym bag was still sitting by the door where he'd left it yesterday. Harper had learned not to touch his things, but something made her pause. A corner of black fabric was sticking out of the side pocket, not his usual workout clothes. She pulled out a phone, not his regular iPhone, a cheap Android with a cracked screen. Her hands shook as she pressed the power button. No password. The screen lit up directly to a text conversation. The contact name was just V. Harper scrolled up, her heart hammering. Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear that red dress. You're so much better than her. She's let herself go. Once this custody thing is handled, we can finally be together. Photos. Explicit photos of Blake with a woman Harper didn't recognize. Younger. Beautiful. Laughing in hotel rooms that cost more than Harper's monthly salary. Her vision blurred. She kept scrolling, each message worse than the last. The lawyer says we just need to prove she's unstable. Won't be hard. She cries at everything now. Getting rid of the problem permanently. Should have the papers filed by Friday. Harper's knees gave out. She sank onto the couch, the phone clutched in her trembling hand. Getting rid of the problem. That's what she was to him. A problem. The apartment door opened. Blake walked in, still in his suit from work, his expression neutral until he saw her holding the phone. What are you doing? His voice was sharp. What am I doing? Harper stood, her voice shaking with rage and hurt. Blake, who is V? Who is this woman you're sending these messages to? He crossed the room in 3 strides, snatching the phone from her hand. You went through my things. You have no right to invade my privacy. Your privacy. You're cheating on me. Your pregnant wife. Blake's face remained cold. You're being paranoid. Harper, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're emotional and irrational. I saw the photos, I read the messages. You're imagining things, he said calmly, pocketing the phone. This is pregnancy hormones making you crazy. You need help, Harper, professional help. She stared at him, feeling reality tilt. He was gaslighting her, right to her face, making her doubt what she'd seen with her own eyes. I know what I saw, she whispered. Do you? Blake moved closer, his voice dropping to something that sounded almost gentle, almost concerned. Because this is exactly the kind of behavior that worries me. These paranoid episodes, the emotional instability. This is why I've been talking to attorneys about custody arrangements. Her blood ran cold. What? I love you, Harper, but I can't let my child be raised by someone who's having a mental breakdown. It's not safe. I'm not having a breakdown. You're cheating on me. Lower your voice, Blake said, still calm. The neighbors will hear you screaming. That'll look great in court. Harper felt the floor disappear beneath her. He'd planned this. Every word, every accusation. He was building a case against her, and she'd just played right into it by confronting him. I'm going to stay with Ruth tonight, she said, grabbing her purse with shaking hands. We need space, walk. Blake shrugged. Probably for the best. You need to calm down before you hurt yourself or the baby. She fled the apartment, his words following her down the hallway like poison. Ruth Chandler's apartment in the West Village smelled like lavender candles and safety. Harper collapsed on her best friend's couch, the whole story spilling out between them. The phone, the messages, Blake's cold denial. Ruth listened, her face sympathetic, bringing Harper tea and tissues. Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. But you did the right thing getting out of there. I don't know what to do, Harper said. He made me feel crazy like I imagined everything. You're not crazy. He's gaslighting you. Classic abuser behavior. Ruth sat beside her, squeezing her hand. But Harper, you need to be smart about this. If you're going to leave him, you need evidence. Real evidence that will hold up in court. I had evidence. He took the phone. Then we get more evidence. We document everything. We build a case where Ruth's eyes were intense. But you can't confront him again. Not until you have proof he can't deny. Harper nodded, and feeling slightly steadied. Ruth was right. She needed to be strategic, not emotional. I'll help you, Ruth said. Whatever you need, I'm here. The doorbell rang. Ruth frowned. I'm not expecting anyone. She opened the door to reveal a man in a cheap suit holding a manila envelope. Harper Wells. Yes, Harper stood, confused. You've been served. He handed her the envelope and walked away. Harper's hands shook as she opened it. The words swam on the page, but the header was clear. Thornton versus Wells, petition for emergency custody. Her legs gave out. Ruth caught her, easing her back to the couch. Blake was suing for full custody, claiming she was mentally unfit, emotionally unstable, a danger to the unborn child. Attached to the petition were medical records from Dr. Crawford, pages of psychiatric observations Harper had never seen, diagnoses of severe depression, paranoid personality disorder, emotional dysregulation. All lies, professional, documented, impossible to fight lies. He did this, Harper whispered. He planned this whole thing. Ruth looked at the papers, her face pale. Something flickered in her expression. Just for a second, something that might have been guilt. But when Harper looked up, Ruth's face was sympathetic again. We'll fight this, Ruth said. I promise. We'll fight this together. But Harper wanted to believe her. She needed to believe her. She had no idea that her best friend had already chosen sides. Harper barely slept on Ruth's couch. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Blake's smirk, Dr. Crawford's forged records, the judge's gavel coming down against her. At 6 a.m, she gave up and checked her email. Her stomach dropped. The subject line read, contract termination, effective immediately. Her biggest client, the one that paid 70% of her freelance income, was dropping her. The email was cold and corporate. Due to conflicts of interest with our legal representation, we can no longer continue our business relationship. Harper's hands shook. She clicked to another email. Same message, different client. Then another, and another. 4 clients. Gone. All citing conflicts with their legal representation. She pulled up the client files, cross-referencing the law firms listed on their websites. Her blood ran cold. Every single one was either Blake's firm or a partner firm. He was destroying her income, systematically, professionally. Ruth emerged from her bedroom, bleary-eyed. "You're up early." "Blake got me fired," Harper said, her voice hollow. "Or not fired, exactly. He convinced my clients to drop me. 4 of them. I just lost almost all my income." Ruth's face fell. "Oh, Harper, I'm so sorry." Harper's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Mrs. Thornton, this is Citibank. I'm calling about suspicious activity on your joint checking account." "What kind of suspicious activity?" "Your husband filed a fraud claim this morning, stating you've been making unauthorized transfers. We've frozen the account pending investigation." The room spun. "What? No, I haven't made any unauthorized transfers. That account is joint. I have every right to—" "I understand, ma'am, but until we resolve the fraud claim, all funds are frozen. We'll be in touch when we have more information." The line went dead. Harper stared at her phone. Blake had frozen their bank account. She had maybe $200 in cash and no access to their savings. "Ruth, I need to go back to the apartment. I need to get my things." "Are you sure that's safe?" "He's at work. I'll be quick." 20 minutes later, Harper stood outside their Brooklyn building, key in hand. But when she tried to enter, the key didn't work. The locks had been changed. A notice was taped to the door. "Eviction. Tenant removed for violation of lease terms." Harper ripped the notice down with shaking hands. The property owner was listed as Thornton Properties, LLC. Blake owned the building through a shell company she'd never known existed. He'd evicted her from her own home. She sank down on the front steps, the eviction notice crumpling in her fist. In less than 24 hours, Blake had taken everything: her income, her money, her home. A sharp pain shot through her abdomen. Harper gasped, doubling over. The baby. Oh God, the baby. Another contraction, stronger this time. She fumbled for her phone, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. 911, what's your emergency? I'm pregnant, 7 months. I'm having contractions. They won't stop. What's your location? Harper gave the address through gritted teeth. The pain was overwhelming, radiating from her belly through her entire body. She'd read about stress-induced labor, about how emotional trauma could trigger premature birth. This was Blake's fault. All of it. The ambulance arrived within minutes. EMTs loaded her onto a gurney, asking questions she could barely answer. When they asked for her emergency contact, she almost said Blake, then stopped herself. "Ruth Chandler," she whispered, giving Ruth's number. At the hospital, doctors hooked her up to monitors. The contractions gradually slowed, then stopped. False labor, they said. Stress-induced. The baby was okay, but Harper needed to rest. Needed to avoid stress. Avoid stress while fighting for custody, while homeless, while broke. A nurse handed her paperwork, insurance information. Harper stared at the forms, realizing she had no idea if Blake had canceled their health insurance too. He had. The hospital system showed her coverage had been terminated that morning, retroactive to the start of the month. The bill would be thousands. Harper sat alone in the hospital bed, one hand pressed to her belly, and let the tears come, not the desperate sobs from earlier. Just quiet, exhausted crying, the kind that came when you'd been broken so completely that even anger felt too expensive. Ruth arrived an hour later, breathless and concerned. "Oh, honey, are you okay? Is the baby okay?" "We're okay, physically." Harper's voice was flat. "But Blake has taken everything. Ruth, my job, my money, my home, my insurance. He's planned this for months, maybe longer." And I walked right into it. Ruth sat on the edge of the bed, taking Harper's hand. "Then we fight back. We find a lawyer. We get evidence. We show the court what he's really doing. With what money? I have $200. I'll help. I have some savings." Harper wanted to believe in that kindness. She needed to believe someone was on her side. "There's a private investigator I know," Ruth said carefully. "Owen, he's good. Discreet. He doesn't charge much for initial consultations. Maybe he can find something we can use against Blake." Harper nodded slowly. It was something, the smallest thread of hope. "Okay," she whispered. "Call him." Ruth smiled, squeezing her hand. "I will, I promise. Harper, we're going to fix this." But as Ruth pulled out her phone to make the call, Harper saw something on the screen before Ruth switched it off. A text notification from someone named G. Pierce, Garrett Pierce, Blake's attorney. The message preview showed she took the bait. Moving to phase 2, Harper's blood turned to ice. But Ruth had already put the phone away, smiling sympathetically, playing the part of the concerned friend, and Harper realized, with a sickening clarity, that she was completely alone. 3 days later, Harper sat across from Owen in a coffee shop in Queens. The private investigator was maybe 55, with gray stubble and tired eyes that suggested he'd seen every kind of betrayal humans were capable of. "So your husband is trying to take your kid," Owen said, stirring his black coffee. "And you think he's building a fake case against you?" "I know." Harper pushed the custody papers across the table. "These medical records are forged. I never said any of these things to Dr. Crawford. And Ruth, my friend, she's working with Blake's attorney." Owen raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" "I saw a text on her phone from Garrett Pierce, Blake's lawyer. Could be innocent. Could be they know each other. The text said she took the bait. Ruth has been encouraging me to stay with her, to confide in her. She's reporting everything back to Blake." Owen leaned back, studying her. "You're sharper than you look. Most people don't catch that kind of thing until it's too late. It might already be too late. Maybe, maybe not." Owen pulled out a worn notebook. "I charge $800 for a full investigation. I know that's steep, but I'm good at what I do. I can get you evidence that'll stand up in court." Harper opened her wallet. She had exactly $812 left, everything she had in the world. She pushed the cash across the table. "Find me something I can use," she said. "Please?" Owen pocketed the money. "Give me a week." 6 days later, Harper's phone rang. "I got something," Owen said, his voice carrying an edge of satisfaction. "Something big." They met at the same coffee shop. Owen slid a flash drive across the table along with a folder of printed photos. "Your husband's mistress. Her name is Vanessa Lloyd, 26 years old, works as a paralegal at his firm." Harper opened the folder. Photos of Blake and Vanessa at expensive restaurants, holding hands across candlelit tables. Vanessa in the red dress from the text messages. Blake kissing her in the parking garage at his office. "Affair evidence is good," Owen said. "But I got better. Video." He pulled out a laptop, inserted the flash drive, and played a security camera recording. The angle suggested it was from a restaurant's outdoor seating area. Blake and Vanessa sat at a table, wine glasses catching the light. Owen turned up the volume. Blake's voice came through clearly. "Once I get custody, she gets nothing. The prenup's airtight. She signed away any claim to my assets if we divorce, which we will the second the baby is born." Vanessa laughed. "You're terrible. I'm practical. I never wanted kids." "Vanessa, you know that, but if she's pregnant, I need to control the situation. Get custody, get her declared unfit, then quietly transfer custody to my mother. She'll raise it. I'll be free." Harper's hand flew to her mouth. The pregnancy was an accident. Blake continued on the video. "She thought it would save our marriage. Instead, it gave me the perfect opportunity to get out clean. No alimony, no child support, no messy divorce, just a quick custody battle, a few forged medical records, and I'm done." The recording ended. Harper stared at the frozen screen, tears streaming down her face. She'd known Blake didn't love her anymore, but hearing him admit he never wanted their child, that the baby was just a chess piece in his escape plan, felt like being gutted. "That video is gold," Owen said. "That's confession of fraud, conspiracy, perjury. You take that to court. Your husband is done." Hope surged through Harper's chest for the first time in days. "This will work. This will actually work. This will destroy him. Owen said, wow, get it to your lawyer immediately. Harper called Paige Morris from the coffee shop parking lot. The court-appointed attorney sounded skeptical at first, but when Harper described the video, Paige's tone shifted. Harper, if that recording is real, this changes everything. Bring it to my office right now. Harper drove to Paige's office in downtown Brooklyn, clutching the flash drive like a lifeline. Paige watched the video 3 times, her expression growing more satisfied with each viewing. This is it, Paige said. This is everything we need. Confession of fraud, admission of conspiracy, motive clearly established. We present this tomorrow in court, and Blake Thornton is finished. Tomorrow, Harper's voice cracked. The hearing is tomorrow. Emergency hearing. Blake's attorney pushed for it. They want to get temporary custody established before you can mount a defense. But now, Paige smiled, now we have a defense, a good one. Harper called Ruth from the car. She needed to tell someone who would celebrate with her. Ruth, I did it. I got evidence. Video of Blake admitting everything. He's done. He's actually done. Oh my God, Harper, that's amazing. Ruth's voice was warm, excited. I knew you could do it. I'm so proud of you. Send me the video. I want to see his face when he realizes he's caught. Something in Harper hesitated. But Ruth had been supportive through everything. Despite the suspicious text, maybe Harper had been paranoid. Maybe there was an innocent explanation. I'll send you a clip, Harper said. Just to celebrate. She texted Ruth a 30-second portion of the video. Blake's voice admitting he never wanted the baby, that it was all a custody strategy. Ruth responded immediately. He's such a bastard. You're going to win tomorrow. I just know it. Harper let herself believe it. She drove back to Ruth's apartment, ate actual food for the first time in days, and slept for 6 hours straight. When she woke up, the sun was streaming through the windows. Court was in 3 hours. She checked her phone, a voicemail from Owen, left at 2 in the morning. Harper, call me immediately. Something's wrong. Her stomach dropped. She called back, hands shaking. Owen, what is it? My office was broken into last night. Owen said, his voice grim. They took everything related to your case. Files, backup drives, everything. What about the video, the flash drive? I only made 2 copies. One I gave you, one I kept in my office. The one from my office is gone. And Harper, they didn't take anything else. Not money, not equipment, just your files. Harper's mind raced. I still have my copy, the one you gave me. Check it, right now. Harper pulled the flash drive from her purse, jammed it into her laptop. The file opened, but instead of the video, just static, corrupted data, unusable. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Someone got to it, Owen said. Probably malware, remotely corrupted. Harper, I'm sorry. The evidence is gone. Harper stared at the screen, watching the static flicker. Someone had destroyed the evidence. Someone who knew about the video. Someone she'd trusted with the information. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ruth, good luck in court today. You've got this. Harper's hands started shaking. She opened her recent messages with Ruth. The video clip she'd sent last night was deleted, not just from Harper's phone, but the entire conversation thread showed as if it had never been sent. Ruth had access to Harper's phone last night. Harper had fallen asleep on the couch, phone charging on the side table. Ruth had deleted the evidence. Ruth had helped them corrupt the flash drive. Ruth had betrayed her. Harper ran to the bathroom and threw up. When she looked up, Ruth was standing in the doorway, face carefully arranged into concern. Are you okay? Is it the baby? Harper met her friend's eyes and saw the lie there, the calculated performance. I'm fine, Harper said quietly. Just nervous about court. You're going to do great, Ruth said, smiling. I believe in you. Harper smiled back, wooden and false, and realized she was walking into that courtroom with nothing. No evidence, no backup plan, no allies. Blake had won. Harper sat in Paige Morris's cramped office, feeling numb. The attorney looked devastated. Without the video, we have nothing, Paige said. It's your word against Blake's. And he has forged medical records from a licensed physician, character witnesses from his law firm, financial documents showing you've been irrational and volatile. I sent a clip to my friend Ruth last night, Harper said, her voice flat. This morning it's deleted from both our phones. Her boyfriend is Garrett Pierce, Blake's attorney. She's been feeding them information this whole time. Paige closed her eyes. Harper, I'm so sorry, but that means they knew exactly what evidence we had, and they destroyed it before we could present it. So I've already lost. Unless you have something else, anything else. Harper had nothing, just a corrupted flash drive and the memory of Ruth's sympathetic smile. I need to use your bathroom, Harper said. She locked herself in the tiny office bathroom and stared at her reflection. 7 months pregnant, dark circles under her eyes, hollow-cheeked from not eating. She looked exactly like the unstable woman Blake was claiming she was. But beneath the exhaustion, something else stirred, something cold and sharp. Blake had underestimated her. He'd built this entire elaborate trap, manipulated everyone around her, destroyed every piece of evidence. He thought he'd won. He thought she was beaten. What if she let him think that Harper pulled out her phone? She had one advantage Blake didn't know about. She knew Ruth was a spy, which meant she could feed Blake false information, make him think he'd won so completely that he'd get sloppy. She needed more evidence, real evidence. But she couldn't go after Blake directly. He'd expect that. She needed to go after Vanessa. Harper opened her laptop, pulling up the video footage Owen had shown her before it was corrupted. She'd watched it enough times to remember the restaurant, the angle of the security camera, the way Vanessa had laughed. Vanessa thought she was winning, thought she was getting Blake. But Blake had said it himself in that video he didn't want kids, didn't want commitment. Once he was free of Harper, what made Vanessa think he wouldn't do the same thing to her? Harper needed Vanessa to realize she was being used, needed her to turn on Blake. But first, she had to survive today's hearing. The courtroom felt smaller the second time. Harper sat at the defense table, Paige beside her, watching Blake across the room. He looked confident, victorious already. When he caught her eye, he smiled. Not the cold smirk from before, something almost pitying, like he felt sorry for her. Harper forced herself to look away, to look broken. It wasn't hard to fake. She felt broken. Judge Reeves entered, and everyone stood. The hearing began exactly as Harper expected. Garrett presented Blake's case with smooth efficiency, the forged medical records, character testimony from Blake's law partners about Harper's erratic behavior, financial records showing her recent job losses and poor decisions. Paige tried to object, but without counter evidence. Her objections were overruled. Then Blake took the stand. Mr. Thornton, Garrett said, can you describe your concerns about your wife's mental state? Blake sighed, the picture of reluctant honesty. I love Harper. I've always loved her. But over the past 6 months, she's changed. She's become paranoid, accusing me of affairs that don't exist. Going through my things, she's convinced everyone is against her. Harper wanted to scream. Every word was a lie wrapped in false concern. I've tried to get her help, Blake continued, but she refuses treatment. And now, with the baby coming, I can't stand by and watch her spiral. My child deserves stability. And you believe you can provide that stability. I know I can. My mother has agreed to help with childcare. I have the financial resources and the support system. Harper has nothing. She's lost her whippo, her apartment. She has no family in New York. I don't say this to be cruel. I say it because it's true. Judge Reeves was listening intently. Her face was neutral, but Harper could read the decision forming. Paige called Harper to the stand. Mrs. Thornton, do you believe you're mentally unstable? No, Harper said, trying to keep her voice steady. My husband is manipulating the situation. He's been having an affair. He's the one who got me fired, who froze my bank accounts. Do you have proof of this? Harper hesitated. I did, but it was destroyed. How convenient, Garrett murmured, loud enough for the judge to hear. The hearing lasted 90 minutes. At the end, Judge Reeves looked tired. I'll issue a ruling within 24 hours, she said, but I'm leaning toward granting temporary custody to Mr. Thornton, pending further evaluation. Harper's world collapsed. Pending further evaluation meant she'd already lost. The judge just hadn't made it official yet. As they filed out of the courtroom, Blake caught up to her in the hallway. "Harper," he said softly, "it doesn't have to be like this. Drop the custody fight. Let me take care of the baby. I'll make sure you're financially stable. You can visit. We can work something out." She turned to look at him, really look at him. The man she'd married 3 years ago was gone, or maybe he'd never existed. "Go to hell," she said quietly. Blake's false sympathy vanished. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. You've already lost. Harper, everyone can see it." She walked away without answering. Let him think she was defeated. Let him think it was over. That night, Harper sat alone in Ruth's apartment while Ruth was supposedly at work. She opened her laptop and started researching. Vanessa Lloyd, 26, grew up in Connecticut, graduated from CUNY Law School but never took the bar. Working as a paralegal at Thornton and Associates for 3 years? 3 years. She'd been at Blake's firm for 3 years, which meant the affair had started long before Harper got pregnant, probably long before Blake proposed. Harper pulled up Vanessa's social media. Recent photos showed her at expensive restaurants, wearing designer clothes. A woman living beyond a paralegal's salary. Blake was funding her lifestyle. Just like he'd funded Harper's before the trap closed, Harper needed to talk to Vanessa, but not as the desperate wife, no, as someone offering her a way out. She called Owen. "I need to find Vanessa Lloyd's home address." "Harper, what are you planning?" "I'm going to give Blake exactly what he thinks he wants. Me giving up. And then I'm going to burn his whole world down." Harper waited outside Vanessa Lloyd's apartment building in the West Village for 3 hours. When the younger woman finally emerged, dressed in Pilates gear and carrying a yoga mat, Harper stepped into her path. "Vanessa, we need to talk." Vanessa's face went pale. "I don't know what you think you know, but I know everything. The affair, the plan. I know Blake told you he'd leave me for you once he got custody." Harper kept her voice calm. "I'm not here to yell at you. I'm here to warn you." "Warn me," Vanessa laughed nervously. "About what?" "About what he's going to do to you next." They ended up at a coffee shop 2 blocks away. Vanessa sat across from Harper, defensive but curious. "Blake loves me," Vanessa said. "I know you think he's using me, but he's not. He's leaving you because you two aren't compatible anymore." Harper pulled out her phone, opening a folder of screenshots. "These are Blake's bank records from the last 3 years. The ones I pulled before he froze our accounts. See this LLC Thornton Properties? That's how he owns our building. But look at these other transfers. $20,000 to Garrett Pierce for consulting, $50,000 to Dr. Crawford for medical services, $15,000 to Ruth Chandler for information gathering." Vanessa's confidence wavered. "What does this have to do with me? He's paying everyone around him to help destroy me. Ruth, my best friend, sold me out for 15 grand. How much is he paying you, Vanessa?" "He's not paying me anything." "He loves me." Harper pulled up another screenshot. "This is a transfer to your account. $5,000. Last month. Listed as consulting fees." "You're not a consultant. You're a paralegal." Vanessa stared at the screen. "You're the mistress," Harper said quietly. "The affair partner. When this custody battle is over. Do you know what happens to the affair partner? You become a liability. You're the evidence of his bad character. You're the reason he could lose in court if I had a good enough lawyer. Blake wouldn't. Blake will. The second he has custody, he won't need you anymore. And if you think he'll leave his law firm, his reputation, his career for you, you're kidding yourself." Vanessa's hands shook around her coffee cup. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need your help. And because if you don't help me, Blake will destroy you too. He's done it to everyone else. I can't testify against him. He's my boss. I'd lose my job." Harper leaned forward. "Vanessa, you're 26. You're smart. You could do so much better than being a married man's secret. Help me get evidence against Blake. Real evidence. And I'll make sure you walk away clean. You keep the money he gave you. You keep your job. You just help me prove what he's really doing." "What kind of evidence?" "Recordings? Blake confessing his plan? admitting the medical records are forged, admitting he never wanted the baby. He'd never admit that. Not to me. He already has, Harper said. I saw a video, security footage from a restaurant. Blake told you everything. How the pregnancy was an accident, how he's using custody to trap me, how he plans to dump the baby with his mother and walk away free. Vanessa's face went white. That was a private conversation. That was Blake showing you exactly who he is. The question is, are you willing to pretend you didn't see it? For a long moment, Vanessa said nothing. Then, quietly, what do you need me to do? Nchai. The wire was smaller than Harper expected. Owen attached it to Vanessa's bra strap, the microphone hidden beneath her blouse. This is legal in New York, Owen explained. Single-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows they're being recorded, it's admissible in court. Vanessa was shaking. What if he finds it? He won't, Harper said. He trusts you. He thinks he's won. People get sloppy when they think they've won. Vanessa's job was simple. Go to Blake's office. Tell him Harper had approached her and see what Blake would say. If he confessed, if he admitted anything about the forged documents or the plan, they'd have him. Harper and Owen waited in a van parked outside Blake's law firm. The audio feed crackled through a speaker. Vanessa's voice, Blake, do you have a minute? Blake's voice, hey, beautiful. What's up? Your wife approached me today. Harper. Silence. Then Blake, his tone cold. What did she say? She knows about us. She tried to convince me you're using me, that you'll throw me away once you get custody. And what did you tell her? I told her she was crazy, that you love me. But Blake, is it true about the custody thing that you never wanted the baby? More silence. Harper held her breath. Then Blake laughed. The same cruel laugh from the courtroom. Vanessa, come on. You know how Harper is. She's unstable. Paranoid. Of course I want my kid. But at the restaurant, you said, I said what I needed to say to keep you from getting nervous about the timeline. Look, the custody thing is complicated. But once it's settled, we can be together, meaning no more sneaking around. That's what you want, right? Of course, but then trust me, Harper has nothing. She's lost her job, her home, her credibility. The judge is going to rule in my favor, and then we're free. You and me. What about the medical records? Did you really pay Dr. Crawford to? Vanessa? Blake's voice turned sharp. Why are you asking these questions? Harper's heart pounded. They'd pushed too hard. Blake was suspicious. I'm just worried, Vanessa said, her voice trembling. If Harper has evidence, she doesn't. I made sure of that. Ruth deleted the video from her phone. We corrupted the PI's files. Harper has nothing but accusations, and accusations without proof are just paranoia. There it was. Confession. You deleted evidence? Vanessa asked. I protected myself. There's a difference. Blake's tone softened. Look, I know this is messy, but it's almost over. Just a few more days, and we can move on with our lives. Together. Okay, Vanessa whispered. I trust you. Good girl. Now get back to work. The audio feed went quiet. Owen looked at Harper. We got him. Harper pressed her hands to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Finally, honest, real evidence. Evidence Blake couldn't corrupt or destroy. What happens now? Harper asked. Now we file an emergency motion to reopen the custody hearing, and we show the judge exactly who Blake Thornton really is. Harper took a shaky breath. He's going to come after Vanessa when he finds out. Vanessa knew the risks. She made her choice. Harper thought about that, about how many people Blake had manipulated, paid off, destroyed, how many lives he'd ruined to protect his perfect reputation. It was time for that reputation to burn. The emergency hearing was scheduled for the next afternoon. Harper barely slept. She kept replaying Blake's confession in her head, hearing his cold calculation, his casual admission of destroying evidence. When she arrived at the courthouse, Blake was already there, looking confident in another expensive suit. He saw Harper and smiled that same pitying smile. Still thought he'd won. Paige Morris met Harper outside the courtroom, looking almost excited. This recording is good, really good. Blake confessed to evidence tampering, witness bribery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Judge Reeves is going to be furious. Where's Vanessa? She'll be here. Owen's bringing her through a back entrance. We don't want Blake seeing her before the hearing. The courtroom filled quickly. Word had spread that new evidence was being presented. The press bench was crowded with reporters sensing a story. Judge Reeves entered, looking irritated. I hope this emergency motion is worth my time. Miss Morris. It is, Your Honor. We have new evidence that fundamentally changes this case. Garrett Pierce stood. Your Honor, this is a waste of the court's time. Mrs. Thornton has already demonstrated a pattern of making baseless accusations. Sit down, Mr. Pierce, Judge Reeves said sharply. I'll decide what's a waste of my time. Ms. Morris, present your evidence. Page pressed play on the audio recording. Blake's voice filled the courtroom, smooth and confident. Harper has nothing. She's lost her job, her home, her credibility. The judge is going to rule in my favor. Blake's face went pale. The recording continued. Blake admitting he paid Dr. Crawford, admitting Ruth deleted evidence, admitting he destroyed the PI's files. The courtroom was dead silent except for Blake's recorded voice. I protected myself. There's a difference. When the recording ended, Judge Reeves looked at Blake with open disgust. Mr. Thornton, do you care to explain? Blake shot to his feet. Your Honor, this recording is clearly fabricated. My wife is desperate to. She'll say anything, do anything. That's not your wife's voice on the recording. Mr. Thornton, that's yours. The recording is illegal. She had no right. New York is a single-party consent state. Page interrupted. One party in the conversation was aware of the recording. That makes it completely legal. Garrett Pierce was frantically flipping through papers, clearly blindsided. Blake's perfect plan was unraveling in real time. Your Honor, Blake tried again, his voice desperate now. I was speaking hypothetically. That conversation was taken out of context. The courtroom doors opened. Everyone turned. Cole Bennett walked in, flanked by 3 attorneys in matching suits. The energy in the room shifted instantly. This wasn't just a custody case anymore. Your Honor, Cole said, his voice carrying effortless authority. I apologize for the interruption, but this case intersects with an ongoing criminal investigation my company is conducting. Judge Reeves blinked. Mr. Bennett, this is highly irregular. I understand, but as of this morning, my cybersecurity firm uncovered evidence that Mr. Thornton has been involved in a scheme to defraud his wife, manipulate court documents, and commit identity theft using her personal information. Blake's face went from pale to gray. This is ridiculous, Your Honor. This man is my wife's ex-boyfriend. This is clearly... Be quiet, Mr. Thornton, Judge Reeves snapped. Cole's attorney approached the bench with a thick folder. Your Honor, enclosed are financial records showing Mr. Thornton opened multiple bank accounts using Mrs. Thornton's identity without her knowledge or consent. These accounts were used to funnel money to witnesses, including Ruth Chandler and Dr. Melissa Crawford, in exchange for false testimony. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. We also have evidence of Mr. Thornton using his law firm's resources to sabotage Mrs. Thornton's freelance contracts and using shell companies to control her housing situation. Harper's hands shook. This was more than she'd hoped for. Cole had found everything. Judge Reeves flipped through the documents, her expression darkening with each page. Mr. Thornton, this is serious. These are federal crimes. Blake stood, his composure completely shattered. Your Honor, I can explain these documents are misleading. They show, Judge Reeves interrupted, a systematic campaign of harassment, fraud, and manipulation. Mr. Pierce, I suggest you advise your client to remain silent. Garrett was already packing his briefcase. The look he gave Blake was pure betrayal. He'd been kept in the dark too. Where is Vanessa Lloyd? Judge Reeves asked. Page stood. Ms. Lloyd is prepared to testify, Your Honor. Vanessa entered through the side door, escorted by Owen. She looked terrified but determined. When Blake saw her, his eyes went wide with betrayed rage. You, he hissed, you set me up. No, Vanessa said quietly. You set yourself up. I just stopped lying for you. Blake lunged toward her. Court security grabbed him, forcing him back into his chair. The courtroom erupted in noise. Cameras flashing, reporters shouting questions. Judge Reeves banged her gavel repeatedly. Order, I will have order in this courtroom. When the room finally quieted, she turned to Blake, her voice cold as ice. Mr. Thornton, I'm granting full temporary custody to Mrs. Thornton. I'm issuing a restraining order preventing you from coming within 500 feet of your wife or child, and I'm referring this case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Your Honor, please, Blake started. Furthermore, you're being held in contempt of court. Bailiff, detain Mr. Thornton. Two bailiffs moved toward Blake. He stood, his face twisted in fury. This is all your fault, he spat at Harper. You couldn't just let it go. You had to destroy everything. Harper met his eyes, her voice steady for the first time in months. No, Blake, you destroyed everything. I just made sure everyone could see it. As the bailiffs led Blake away in handcuffs, the courtroom dissolved into chaos. Reporters rushed forward, cameras flashing. Garrett Pierce fled through a side door. Vanessa sat down heavily, crying with relief. Cole approached Harper slowly. Are you okay? She looked up at him. This man she'd left 8 years ago because she thought he couldn't love her and his company at the same time. Why did you do this? Because someone should have protected you a long time ago, he said quietly. I'm just sorry it took me this long. Harper wanted to thank him, wanted to tell him that seeing him walk through those courtroom doors had felt like being saved, but the words stuck in her throat. I need to go, she said instead. I need some air. She walked out of the courthouse alone, pushing through reporters by shouting questions. Outside, the Manhattan sun was bright and cold. Harper pressed her hand to her belly, feeling the baby kick. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. But even in victory, something felt hollow. Blake was going to prison. Her best friend had betrayed her. Cole had swept in like a hero, but that didn't erase 8 years of absence. Harper had won her case, but she'd lost so much more. And the hardest part, she still had to figure out how to rebuild a life from the ashes of betrayal. Harper spent that night at a hotel, unable to face Ruth's apartment, even though Ruth had reportedly packed up and left the city. The news was everywhere. Blake Thornton, prominent attorney, arrested on fraud charges. His law firm in chaos. His political ambitions destroyed. Harper should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt exhausted. Her phone rang constantly. Reporters, old friends suddenly reaching out. Her mother calling from Arizona, wanting to know if the headlines were true. Harper turned her phone off and sat in the hotel room's silence, one hand on her belly, trying to process what came next. A knock on the door made her jump. Harper, it's Cole. She considered not answering, but curiosity won. She opened the door to find Cole standing there with takeout bags and a cautious expression. I thought you might not have eaten, he said. Can I come in? She stepped aside. They sat at the small table, unpacking Thai food that smelled better than anything Harper had eaten in weeks. How did you know where I was? She asked. Owen told me. He's worried about you. Everyone's worried about me. I'm the tragic pregnant woman who almost lost everything. Cole set down his chopsticks. You're not tragic. Harper, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. I don't feel strong. I feel broken. You survived a systematic campaign to destroy you. You turned Blake's own plan against him. That's not broken. That's brilliant. Harper laughed, but it came out bitter. I had to trick my best friend, set up my husband's mistress, let you swoop in and save me. That doesn't feel brilliant. It feels desperate. Desperate and brilliant aren't mutually exclusive. They ate in silence for a while. Then Harper asked the question that had been burning in her chest since the courtroom. Why now? Cole, where were you 8 years ago when I needed you? He set down his food, his expression pained. 8 years ago, I was a coward. I chose my company over you because I was terrified of failing. I thought if I could just build something successful enough, I'd deserve you. But by the time I realized success meant nothing without you, you'd already moved on. I married Blake because he wasn't like you, Harper said quietly. He promised me stability, presence. He said he didn't care about ambition. He just wanted a life with me. And that was all a lie too. I'm not asking for another chance, Cole said. I know I don't deserve one. I just want you to know that when I saw your name in that court filing, when I realized what Blake was doing to you, I couldn't walk away. Not again. Harper felt tears building. You can't fix this with money and lawyers. Cole, you can't fix what we were. I know, but maybe we can build something new. Before Harper could respond, her phone buzzed. She'd turned it back on to check messages. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won? This isn't over. Her blood ran cold. Cole, he read the message over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. That's Blake. He's in jail. He gets one phone call. Looks like he used it to threaten you. Another message. I'll destroy you for this. You and everyone who helped you. Cole pulled out his own phone, making a call. I need security at the Gramercy Park Hotel. Room 412. Client is receiving threats. He hung up. You're not staying here alone tonight. Cole, I'm not asking. Harper, Blake is dangerous, especially now that he's lost it everything. Within an hour, 2 security guards were posted outside Harper's room. Cole left only after she promised to call if she needed anything. Alone again. Harper lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Blake's words echoed in her head. This isn't over. What if he was right? What if winning in court was just the beginning of a different kind of nightmare? The next morning, Harper woke to her phone ringing. Paige Morris, her attorney. Harper, we have a problem. Her stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Judge Reeves called an emergency hearing. Blake's new attorney is arguing that the recording was obtained illegally and that Cole Bennett's involvement constitutes improper outside interference in a custody case. But you said the recording was legal. It is, but Blake's new lawyer is good. Really good. He's claiming Vanessa was coerced into wearing the wire, that Cole's company overstepped their authority, that the whole case is tainted by prosecutorial misconduct. Harper felt the world tilting. We're going to lose. I don't know. The hearing is in 2 hours. Can you get to the courthouse? Harper threw on clothes, her hands shaking. This couldn't be happening. They'd won. Blake was going to jail. How could it fall apart this fast at the courthouse? Cole was already there, looking grim. Harper, I'm sorry. I didn't think they'd be able to challenge the evidence. They can't actually throw it out, can they? If they prove I overstepped in the investigation, if they can show any procedural violation, the judge might dismiss everything related to my company's findings. The courtroom was packed again. Blake sat at the defense table with a new attorney, a sharp-faced woman named Patricia Morrison, who had a reputation for getting white-collar criminals acquitted. Judge Reeves entered, looking even more exhausted than yesterday. Ms. Morrison, you've filed a motion to suppress evidence. Make your case. Patricia stood, her voice crisp and professional. Your Honor, Mr. Bennett's involvement in this case represents a clear conflict of interest. He's the defendant's ex-boyfriend. He has unlimited financial resources, and he used his company's investigative power to interfere in a private custody dispute. Furthermore, the recording of my client was obtained through coercion of Ms. Lloyd, who was not properly informed of her rights. Ms. Morris, Judge Reeves asked. Paige stood, but Harper could see the defeat in her posture. Your Honor, Ms. Lloyd wore the wire voluntarily. Mr. Bennett's investigation was legitimate. The evidence stands. Does it? Patricia pulled out a document. This is an affidavit from Vanessa Lloyd, recanting her previous testimony. She states that she was threatened by Mrs. Thornton and coerced into participating in an illegal sting operation. Harper's world stopped. Vanessa had changed her story. Paige looked stunned. Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing of this. Because it happened this morning, Patricia said smoothly. Miss Lloyd was scared yesterday. Today, she's telling the truth. She was manipulated by Mrs. Thornton, just as my client has maintained all along. Judge Reeves flipped through the affidavit, frowning. This is concerning Ms. Morris. Did you or your client threaten Miss Lloyd? Absolutely not, Your Honor. Miss Lloyd chose to help of her own free will. Then why would she recant? No one had an answer, Patricia continued. Furthermore, Your Honor, Mr. Bennett's so-called investigation has no legal standing in a family court matter. He's not law enforcement. He's a private citizen with a vendetta. Every piece of evidence his company provided is fruit of the poisonous tree and should be excluded. Harper watched Judge Reeves' expression shift. The sympathy from yesterday was gone, replaced with judicial skepticism. Your Honor, Page tried again. Even without Mr. Bennett's evidence, we have the recording, which Ms. Lloyd now claims was obtained through coercion. Patricia's smile was thin. Your Honor, my client has been the victim of a campaign of harassment by his unstable wife and her wealthy ex-boyfriend. The court should see this for what it is: manipulation of the legal system. Judge Reeves was silent for a long moment. Then she said the words Harper had been dreading. I'm going to grant the motion to suppress. All evidence obtained by or through Mr. Bennett's company is excluded. The recording is excluded pending further investigation into how it was obtained. Your Honor, please. Harper stood without thinking, her voice breaking. Mrs. Thornton, sit down. He confessed you heard him confess. I heard a recording that may have been obtained illegally. That's not the same thing. Judge Reeves looked genuinely sorry, but her voice was firm. I'm reversing my previous ruling. Temporary custody is granted to Mr. Thornton, pending a full investigation. The courtroom exploded. Harper couldn't breathe. The baby kicked violently against her ribs, sensing her panic. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Cole tried to reach her, but security was already moving between them. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. Blake stood, his smile returning. Victorious again, Harper's vision blurred. She heard Page shouting something, felt hands guiding her out of the courtroom. Outside, she collapsed against a wall, gasping. She'd lost. After everything, after all the fighting and planning and hoping, she'd lost. Blake was going to take her baby. And this time, she had no more tricks, no more plans, no more hope. She sank to the floor, one hand pressed to her stomach, and let the despair swallow her whole. Harper sat on a bench outside the courthouse for an hour. Numb. Page tried to talk to her, but Harper couldn't process the words. Cole kept his distance, speaking quietly with his attorneys. The press had moved on to chase Blake for a statement. She'd lost. Completely. Blake had won. Except Harper's phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Owen. Don't react. Just read. She opened the message thread. Owen, Vanessa didn't recant. She's been kidnapped. Harper's heart stopped. Owen, Blake's people grabbed her this morning, forced her to sign that affidavit. She managed to get a message out. Another text. This is all part of your plan. Remember, let Blake think he's won. Harper stared at the phone, her mind racing. Part of her plan. What plan? Then she remembered. The conversation in the coffee shop 3 days ago. Owen asking what she was going to do. Harper saying, Ollie, I'm going to give Blake exactly what he thinks he wants. She'd known Blake wouldn't stop after one court hearing. Knew he'd fight back. So she'd built a trap that required her to look completely defeated. Harper stood slowly, schooling her expression into devastation. Page approached, and Harper whispered, I need to go home. I can't be here anymore. Harper, we can appeal. There's no point. Harper made her voice break, made herself look like a woman who'd given up. I can't fight him anymore. He's too powerful. She walked away, feeling cameras follow her, feeling Blake's victory solidify. But in her pocket, her phone buzzed again. Owen phase 2 starts now. Blake's arrest had been public. His release on bail 3 hours later was not. He walked out of a side entrance of the courthouse, his new attorney Patricia Morrison at his side, and headed straight to his office. What Blake didn't know, Owen had planted a tracking device on his briefcase during the courthouse chaos, and Vanessa hadn't been kidnapped. She'd been in protective custody the entire time, working with Harper to build the real case. The affidavit was fake, a plant to make Blake feel safe. At Blake's law firm, he held an emergency meeting with his remaining partners. Owen's surveillance equipment, legally placed in the conference room by building security, who owed him a favor, captured every word. Blake's voice, the wife is finished. The judge dismissed all of Bennett's evidence. We're clear. Garrett Pierce. Are you sure? What if they appeal, Blake? Let them. Without the recording, they have nothing. And Vanessa's recantation destroyed their credibility. I'll have full custody in a week. Another voice. One Harper didn't recognize. What about the fraud charges? Blake laughed. Please, white-collar crime with a first-class attorney. I'll get probation at worst. The firm's reputation might take a hit, but I'll rebuild. Garrett. And Harper. Blake's voice went cold. Harper gets nothing. No custody, no settlement, no support. I want her to know what it feels like to lose everything. There it was. Confession number 2. But this time with witnesses who weren't coerced, with audio that couldn't be challenged. Owen called Harper. We got him, again. Is it enough? It's better. He's confessing to ongoing crimes, conspiracy to commit perjury, witness tampering. And we have Vanessa's real statement, given voluntarily to a federal prosecutor this morning. Harper closed her eyes, letting relief wash through her. When do we spring it? Tomorrow. Let him have one night thinking he's won. The next morning, Harper arrived at the courthouse with Cole and Paige. Blake was already there, looking rested and confident. He smiled when he saw Harper, that same pitying smile. Here to formally surrender, he asked. Something like that, Harper said quietly. Judge Reeves looked irritated to see them all again. Miss Morris, I hope you're not wasting the court's time with an appeal. My ruling was clear. Your Honor, we're not here to appeal. We're here to present new evidence that emerged after yesterday's hearing. Patricia Morrison stood. Your Honor, this is harassment. My client has already been exonerated. Sit down, Miss Morrison, Judge Reeves said tiredly. Let's hear what they have. Paige played the recording from Blake's office. The entire conference room conversation. Blake's laughter, his plan to leave Harper with nothing. His casual discussion of his expected probation. Blake's face went white. Then Vanessa Lloyd walked in. Not the terrified woman from 2 days ago. Calm, determined. Your Honor, I need to clarify something, Vanessa said. The affidavit I supposedly signed yesterday was forged. I never recanted my testimony. I've been in protective custody with the FBI. What? Patricia looked genuinely shocked. I didn't trust the local court system to protect me from Blake. Vanessa continued. So I contacted federal prosecutors. They've been investigating Blake's firm for money laundering and fraud for 6 months. My testimony is part of a larger federal case. A woman in a dark suit entered from the back of the courtroom, holding up FBI credentials. Your Honor, I'm Special Agent Lisa Turner. Ms. Lloyd is a cooperating witness in an ongoing federal investigation. Her safety has been our priority. Judge Reeves looked like she'd been hit with a brick. Ms. Morrison, did you know about this federal investigation? Patricia was frantically flipping through papers, clearly blindsided. No, Your Honor. This is the first I'm hearing of it. Because your client didn't tell you. Agent Turner said, Mr. Thornton has been under federal investigation since last year. Wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft. The custody case was just one piece of a much larger criminal enterprise. Blake stood, his face twisted with rage. This is entrapment. You set me up. No, Harper said, her voice steady and strong. You set yourself up. Every lie, every manipulation, every threat. I just gave you enough rope to hang yourself. Agent Turner approached Blake. Blake Thornton, you're under arrest for federal wire fraud, conspiracy to commit identity theft, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. Federal agents moved into the courtroom, surrounding Blake. Patricia stepped back, clearly distancing herself from her client. Your Honor, Paige said, in light of these developments, we're requesting emergency full custody for Mrs. Thornton, plus a permanent restraining order. Judge Reeves looked at Blake, who was being handcuffed by federal agents, then at Harper. Granted, full custody to Mrs. Thornton, permanent restraining order. Mr. Thornton is to have no contact with his wife or child, now or in the future. As agents led Blake toward the door, he lunged toward Harper. 2 agents grabbed him, forcing him back. You bitch, he screamed. You destroyed my life. Harper met his eyes, her voice calm. No, Blake, I survived yours. The courtroom erupted in chaos as Blake was dragged out, still screaming threats. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. Patricia Morrison fled through a side door, already calling damage control. Harper stood still in the center of the storm, one hand on her belly, and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Freedom. Cole approached slowly. You planned this. The whole thing. You let everyone think you'd lost. I learned from the best, Harper said. Blake taught me that people are most dangerous when they think they've won. So I let him win. Just long enough for him to incriminate himself beyond any doubt. That was risky. It was necessary. Harper turned to face him. Thank you for your help, Cole, for everything. But I need you to understand something. I didn't win because you saved me. I won because I saved myself. Cole nodded slowly. I know, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Harper smiled faintly. That actually means something coming from you. So what happens now? Now I figure out how to build a life for me and my son. Alone, Shwen. Does it have to be alone? Harper looked at him. This man she'd loved and left, who'd shown up when she needed him, but couldn't be what she needed long term. For now, yes. Ask me again in a year. Cole's smile was sad but genuine. I can wait a year. As Harper walked out of the courthouse, reporters shouting questions she didn't answer, she felt the weight of the past months finally lift. Blake was going to prison. Her baby was safe. And for the first time in years, her life was completely her own. It wasn't the fairy tale ending, but it was real. And it was hers. The playground in Brooklyn was quiet on Tuesday afternoons. Harper sat on a bench, watching her son sleep in his stroller. Owen, 3 months old. Perfect. She'd named him after the private investigator who'd believed her when no one else did. Owen the elder had cried when she told him. The past 3 months had been a blur of rebuilding. A new apartment. Smaller but hers. Freelance clients slowly returning once the news cycle moved on. Therapy twice a week to work through the trauma of Blake's manipulation. And nights alone with Owen. Learning to be a mother without the shadow of fear hanging over her. Blake had been sentenced 2 weeks ago. 5 years in federal prison. His law firm had collapsed within days of his arrest. Garrett Pierce was disbarred. Dr. Crawford lost her medical license. Ruth Chandler disappeared. Last heard from in California. The empire Blake built on lies had burned completely. Harper's phone rang. Cole. She smiled despite herself. Hello. Hi, how's Owen? Perfect. Sleeping finely. How's San Francisco? Boring without you. Cole had moved to his company's West Coast office, giving Harper space like she'd asked. But he called every day. I'm flying back next week. Board meeting. Will you have time for coffee? I'll make time, always. They talked for a few more minutes. Easy conversation about nothing important. When Harper hung up, she felt something unfamiliar. Contentment. Movement caught her eye. A woman approaching across the playground. Harper's stomach clenched. Ruth. She looked terrible. Thinner. Dark circles under her eyes. None of the polish she'd always maintained. She stopped a few feet away. Not coming closer. Harper, please don't run. I just need 2 minutes. Harper's first instinct was to leave, but curiosity kept her seated. 2 minutes. Ruth sat on a bench opposite, keeping distance between them. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know I'm sorry. What I did was unforgivable. You sold me out for $15,000. I sold you out because I was in debt and terrified. Ruth's voice broke. Blake knew I owed money to the wrong people. He offered to pay them off if I helped him. I told myself it was just information, that I wasn't really hurting you. I was wrong. Harper stared at her former best friend. You destroyed evidence that could have saved me. You helped Blake paint me as crazy. I know, and I've had to live with that every day since. I lost my job, my apartment. Everyone I know won't speak to me. I'm living in a shelter in California, and I deserve all of it. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to hear it. That I'm sorry, that I was weak and selfish, and that you were the best friend I ever had, and I destroyed that for money. Tears streamed down Ruth's face. I don't want forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I regret it. Every single day. Harper looked at her sleeping son, then back at Ruth. She felt no anger, no hatred, just profound sadness for the friendship that could have been. I hope you find a way to live with yourself. Ruth, I really do, but I can't be part of that journey. Ruth nodded, wiping her eyes. I understand. Take care of yourself. Harper, and your baby. She walked away across the playground, shoulders hunched, alone. Harper watched her go and felt nothing. No satisfaction in Ruth's suffering, no desire to reach out, just the quiet closing of a door that should never have been opened. Owen stirred in his stroller, making small baby sounds. Harper picked him up, holding him close. "Just you and me, little one," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." Her phone buzzed. A text from Paige Morris, Blake's mother, filed for visitation rights. "We need to talk," Harper sighed. Of course, Blake's family wouldn't go quietly. But as she walked Owen home through the Brooklyn streets, afternoon sun warming her shoulders, Harper realized something important. She wasn't afraid anymore. Blake had tried to break her, had tried to take everything, and she'd survived. More than survived. She'd won, not by being saved, by saving herself. Another text. "Cole, thinking about you." Harper typed back, "Good thoughts, I hope. Cole, always. You and Owen are the best parts of my day." Harper smiled, tucking her phone away. Maybe in a year, she'd be ready to try again with Cole. Maybe not. Either way, she had time to decide. Time to heal. Time to build the life she wanted instead of the one someone else designed for her. As she unlocked her apartment door, Owen cooing contentedly in her arms, Harper thought about everything she'd learned, about how love should never feel like control, about how the people who truly care about you make you more yourself, not less, about how surviving sometimes means burning everything down and starting over. She'd lost her marriage, her best friend, her naive belief that justice was simple, but she'd gained something more valuable, herself. Harper set Owen down in his crib, watching his tiny chest rise and fall. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside, her apartment was quiet and safe. "We made it," she whispered to her sleeping son. "Against everything, we made it." And for the first time in years, Harper Wells looked forward to tomorrow. Not because someone promised it would be perfect, but because it would be hers. So that's Harper's story. From broken and betrayed to building her own empire. If this story moved you, show some love with a like. Drop a comment telling me would you have forgiven Ruth, and subscribe because I've got more incredible true stories coming our way. Remember, survival isn't the ending. It's just the beginning. See you in the next one.